So we're finally going to run through my own drive. We're going to do part of it this week, focus on shafts this week, and then zone in with heads and maybe kind of final specs potentially next week. So that's the plan. So give a bit of a background on it. What I've done a bit of a pre-test because there's not enough minutes in this hour to get through all the shafts that I would have wanted to do some testing on. So I've done a few hits earlier this afternoon, and gone from about 15, 18 shafts down to, I got realistically 7 or 8. But I thought the best way to go about it was to go through, hit each of them. I've got my gamer shaft using a Titleist TSR2 head as a kind of a control head. So it's not necessarily a head I'm going to end up with, but something that's very, what we call inoffensive flight. It's very neutral, mid-launch, mid-spin. There's not a heavy influence on ball flight from it. So use that as a kind of a control on the head, and then go through each of the shafts and talk through what I'm experiencing hitting them, what I'm looking for from a feel, and what I'm wanting to see from a numbers point of view, and to see what sort of differences we find. So any questions as you are already, there are a few questions already coming. Any questions you fire through, if there's anything you want to ask why I'm not necessarily testing, I'll answer as much as possible. Hopefully I'll see. Looking forward to it, Dave Hurley. I hope I can perform for you this evening. So, yeah, so essentially all the shafts have come in that were due to come in. Their heads have now in. So I thought I wanted to leave it until now because my gamer driver I played for the last 5, 6, 7 years, certainly head-wise, the M4 and the XC6 that I'm currently using has been so consistent that I wanted to leave it till everything's in before I do the comparison. So, so I'll go through, talk you through as much as I can. I do, very briefly at the beginning, I do want to say, well played Ricky Fowler for winning. Great to see him in the winner's circle in the playoff. Get over the line. I thought it was great. Yeah, he's been so close recently. Unfortunately, 2 weeks too late for Stuart's bet at the US Open. And then Daniel Hillier in the European Tour, 2-putt from the back of the 18th. Very impressive goal to finish. Eagle, birdie, eagle, par on that course. Some great watching. The Belfry is a course that divides opinion, but it always produces a bit of an interesting result. So I thought that was good fun watching. So Stuart, yeah, can't wait to see where this goes. Now, do you mean the ball or the shaft selection? So Neil's comment, we've seen that Simon can adapt to quite a variety of shafts. How will you make sure the fit is actually for your native swing and not just me unconsciously adapting? So that's part of, as I talk through it, I know what I'm looking to feel to keep me as unaffected by the shaft as possible. So for me, when I'm swinging a club, I know when it's in the right kind of area, when I'm not having to adapt myself to deliver the club. And by that I mean that I've always been very sensitive to head weight and balance point and head weight, whether that's just due to a quirk in action or not. But I've always historically had a move off, a back on, and then a catapult. So it's meant I've had to be very, very keen on timing. I've had to rely on timing a lot over the years, which is where Mr. Cartwright has been helping out the last few years to make me less reliant on timing. But I've always, as a result of that, I can only think it is as a result of that, I've always had a very strong awareness of where that club head is, and then how, and more importantly, how much I've got to do to deliver it. So what I'm looking to get from the right shaft selection in particular is the setup that allows me, just from the one on the way back, that the club stays in balance in plane, that I don't feel like it, if it goes light, I feel like I can pick it up, and there's less resistance, less actually weight keeping the club in plane, and a little bit heavier it can get in behind me. So I'm looking for the club almost to feel light on the way back, which means it stays in plane, and similarly on the way down, that I can just move through impact and just collect the ball, so not have to, as you said, adjust myself to it. So yes, I can adjust to it, but I know it's right when I don't have to. So I'm going to just free it up as much as possible. Stuart, back to him the week after the US Open. Yeah, you see, unlucky Stuart, unlucky. Mind you have a dog now to console yourself with. This won't just be an hour, will it be until you're happy with the shaft? I've already done a bit of, James is on drums as usual, by the way, so he'll be able to feed questions and things in. He's on the mic as well, so any questions for him as well, just fire them in. So I'm going to start off with Graphite Design, the Tour AD XC6. This is my current gamer shaft, just to give us a kind of a control test. So this is something I've been using for the last few years, been very, very reliable, been a club I've really got on with. So I'm just going to get a few, just to get some base numbers, and get a base sort of balance of performance, and then that gives us something to work from. So a little bit low, that'll spin, but felt pretty straight. Yep. Horrible strike, but a good face angle. So I'll just do 2 or 3 just to get I only really need one solid one. And that's really one of the things when I'm testing, I'm not going to hit shot after shot after shot with each one, because I want to just, if I hit more than 2 or 3, I will start to adjust to them. So I just want to feel which one feels the most natural through the ball, and then we can dial them in from there. That's a very stable hit. A little fadey, but I'll take that. It's not a hook. I'll do one more there. Okay, so second 2 are pretty solid there. So as a head, it's slightly higher spin than I would normally use. So I'm not necessarily looking to optimize spin numbers in this session. I'm looking to optimize general, whether it's consistency, feel. I mean, this one won't end up winning because I've already got it in play. So I am looking to put a different setup in play. But it's going to be little things like how clean is the delivery? Do I like the feel of the shaft? Am I gaining any speed? So generally my swing weights are around D3. All of these shafts are between 61 and 64 grams. So that seems a very narrow window, and it is, but I'm never really going to test anything wildly outside that just because I know it's not going to work. So it's always going to be fine-tuned because I haven't deteriorated physically too much the last few years, trying to halt the decline. So I'm always going to need fairly tip stable. That's partly a feel thing. I always preferred a slightly stouter feel because my miss has always been left. Something with a bit of weight mid to lower half generally. Yeah, and that lower half of the 60s weight-wise. So I'm going to start off with a sort of a favourite shaft of most people, the Ventus Black 6 Stiff Fujikura. The black I tested the blue earlier as well, and the reason the black versus the blue for me is that the bottom half, the balance point in the black, is a little bit more towards the tip. It's actually why the TRs aren't the best for me, because I lose a bit of feel for the club head. So a couple of other comments coming in. Matt Hyatt, can't wait for the X Z6 to best perform, and you have to eat your words on that comment. I didn't say it wouldn't be the best, I just said I'm not going to go with it as another option because I'm already playing it. Graham Murray, how do you differentiate the benefits you get from different head types and shaft types on an accurate basis, i.e. when it's one or the other that seems to be the problem rather than the player's swing? So from a shaft point of view, it's timing. You're going to see if someone can't move the club in sync with how their body moves, then most of the time it's a weight issue, whether it's shaft weight, balance point. It can be a head weight issue, can be a swing weight issue, but really from a fitting point of view, and I'm assuming that's the nature of the question, is you want to isolate each section. If you can isolate each area, you can then rule it in or out. And generally speaking, it's you can be pretty certain something's going to make a difference, but until you test it with that specific person, it doesn't necessarily show itself. So you're always fitting is A/B testing. It's take a known parameter, change it, and see whether it makes a positive or a negative change. If it's a positive one, then you keep going down that line until it stops being positive, until you go too far. If it's a negative thing, then because you know you've changed, you can very quickly go back the other way and work towards a correction. So going into the Ventus Black. So stable tip, sort of stout feel, something I've always liked. So pickups generally feels just a little heavier. I'm just going to make the head weight slightly heavier. The only reason I'm saying that is because I don't want to have to compensate, and if I don't make the head heavier, I'm going to start to steer it. So that's just effectively trying to give every setup a fair run at it, because swing weight is not absolute. It's not something that tracks across every single shaft and head and feels the same to swing. So I've got to try and get them as similar to swing from a feel and a timing point of view, so I'm not, put into the question earlier, so I'm not compensating. So. Okay, better a little bit. So I had to make the head weight slightly heavier on this, but that felt nice and solid. Okay, that's good. So certainly going from the XC, which is not the stiffest in the handle end, to the Ventus Black, it's a slightly tighter feel. It's quite a nice feel. And I would say probably distance at your ball speed's gone up. So straight away I've gained a couple of miles an hour ball speed. That's up nearly 162. Isn't bad for an old man, Mr. Hyatt. Before you comment. I'll give that one more. That's nice. So that starts to feel like I can just get through the back of that and start to commit a little bit more. So what I'm going to do a couple with each, and then we'll rule them in and out, and then we can come back to and then dial them down to probably a couple, which I'll then next time take on to look at the heads. So that certainly allows me to really get through it, and I feel like I can move fast with it without having to fetch at it. So that's good. We'll put that in the keep pile. So what I will do, I have got one shaft which I know not to be quite as good, but I will put that in about halfway through just so you guys can see what happens when I go outside of a weight threshold that I'm comfortable with. I'm smiling because one of our staff members is trying to work out whether being facetious or polite. Let's check the swing weight on this. So I want to make sure they stay in the same kind of area. So this one's shaft swing is a little heavier. It's up at D4. I'm just going to take a little bit of that weight off. So going into the, change the tag, going into the TPT. So balance point wise, this is a little bit more in the tip. Hence having just to change the head weight back down again a little bit. Okay, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to just do one more. I'm very stable through impact. The bit that I was interested in, the ball flight data is very good, launch and spin, and I got it back online. Didn't necessarily feel like it flowed quite as naturally as the Ventus Black, and by that I mean that bit, particularly the backswing of the club, finding its own plane back. So didn't feel quite as simple on the way. It felt like I had to kind of put the club in play, which happened to do quite well on that one. But from a repeatability point of view, that then makes it a little bit tougher to deliver the club the same way each time. So. Yeah, so this one, I can feel myself just lose the club a little on the backswing. So strike's gone off a little bit there. So with the Ventus Black, it got better and better with a couple of hits. That one I've just lost track of, lost the contact. Path's got a bit out to in. So ball speed's solid, but not tracking quite as well. And yes, to answer the question I should have said earlier, all of these are 44 3/4 to 45 inches. Generally 44 3/4. So I'm going to put that one over there because that just, whilst it's a great quality material, you can feel that from the swing, very stable through the ball. It's more about, does it let me just move and it come with me? So I'm going to park that to one side. Going to go next into Project X HZRDUS small batch smoke green 60. So this is the Hulk version. Again, tip stable, low spin. Yeah, they're all actually, I mean, torque ratios go from 3.0 and all these 3.0 to 3.8. That's really a feel thing. They're all trying to deliver as much stability. With all these designs are, in the main, certainly mid-lower spin, not necessarily the lowest launch. So one of the options later on, one or two are kind of a mid-upper mid-launch, but actually still have that kind of stable feel that I like. So, and they hit, most importantly, they hit the right weight window to let me move comfortably. And I can check the swing weight. So what's actually quite interesting when I did the testing earlier was there were a couple of shafts which, you know, I went back over shafts that I haven't necessarily got on that well with in the past. So, for example, Ventus Black wasn't one that I particularly used brilliantly previously. This one hadn't got on with that well previously, and so as my techniques developed a little bit, it's just brought some shafts back into the reckoning that didn't used to be. So, and that's just as your patterns change a little bit. So, I mean, obviously this shaft looks great, which is, everyone wants the shaft to look good. And very stable through impact, very solid feel. And potentially just that little lighter on pickup again. This sort of, and it's not necessarily the raw weight of the shaft changing and affecting it much. It can be where the weight sits and where the proportion of head weight to shaft weight. So just as the club comes away, if I get a little that way, or feel-wise, it feels if I can flick it away with my hands, arms, I don't want to get overly handsy. I've always gone better if I can let my body do the move and let the club do the rest of it rather than my hands getting over involved. That's when historically for me it's gone left. So I really don't want to feel like that club gets out of plane on the way back. Certainly not above plane like that. That's not a comfortable feel for me at all, because from here I can drop it in and start it right. So with historically my miss has always been sway off, back on, shove the handle forward, flip. So if there's not anything to hit against in the bottom, I would rather have a little bit more in the bottom end that helps to drop the club in, because I can then at least start it right and draw it back and maybe make the block a bad shot. The moment it gets above my hands there, or I lose the club head, I can get a little bit what feels like that way through the ball and a rip left, which is a really uncomfortable feel for me. So Mr. says, is it camera angle or teeing up off the toe? No, it is. It's something that I think, because I've always had that move off, whether it's irons, driver, putter's about the only one I don't think I do, but I've always aligned it off the toe. The only reason I can think of is having a bit of a move off and back on. As I come back into it, the handle goes that way and the club goes away from me. So it probably mitigated a shank in the past. I've never shanked the ball much, thank goodness. Only when I do videos on here by the looks of it. Yeah, I think I've crept further away from it, and it's a subconscious thing. It's probably just to get strike and not to get it out the heel. But yeah, it is something I address it right out the toe. Again, yeah, it's interesting with the couple from the Ventus Black earlier on, that still just feels almost a little bit, that's just to double check it, a little more headweight, still feels just a little bit light. Just going to put a fraction more headweight on just to double check that, make sure it's not a swing weight thing, but just feels like halfway down, just lose the club a little bit. Yeah, because then the moment I weigh the head up a little bit more, it feels like a lead ball in the end. So, right. So, David, that's fighting talk, Mr. Sayers. Obviously, it will be a very, very fun game at St George's Hill when we eventually get to play after about 15 years of talking about it. Although it depends how many shots they're going to have to give you. That's not good. Yeah, I better think about that. Better tidy my game up. So I'm going to go down to a shaft that's just slightly lighter. This is the Acura, the TZ5. So what I've managed to do is, actually after the Ventus Black, the other two, just managed to sideline those. So I'm expecting to get 2. But you know, good to end up with 2. And then we can follow up next time with dialing in the heads and those shafts just to really kind of find the ideal setup. And so some of it could possibly boil down to feel at the end of the day. They are such similar beasts that it may well be that just one of them just feels more comfortable to swing or feels nicer through the ball. I'm just going to increase that head weight so it's a little lighter swing weight with this, so just have to bring the head weight out a little bit more. So a little bit, this is one of the lighter on dead. This is one of the kind of 60, 61 grab ones, so it's a little bit lighter in weight. Okay, feels faster through the ball from a club speed point of view. Yeah, definitely felt, a bit of weight came off, definitely felt like I could generate more speed with that, which is always nice. It's always nice when it ends up going straight off the back of it though, rather than going into the heather on the left. So I'm just going to re-weight this where it came off. But yeah, a little bit more, a couple of miles an hour more ball speed on that. Which would tie in with, it doesn't always go to theory that lighter weight you can swing quicker, but that one definitely was a little faster and that's a bit longer overall. It's whether I can keep control of it. So the balance of the club flows better. So where I was saying earlier about keeping it in plane, whilst it's a bit lighter, I feel like the club wants to stay with me a little bit more. So that's kind of interesting. I'll give that one more. Yeah, it's close. I think I'll put this in the keep category. I think this one, it's whether from a stability or kind of a confidence point of view, the slightly heavier ones may just give me a bit more to use in the swing, but that's a good one to keep in the mix for sure. And with the Acura stuff again, they've always been very good at low torque, that tight, stable feel through impact. So certainly that first swing was definitely a faster moving swing. So having gone to something lighter, I'm actually going to put an example of, just to show you guys something that's a little bit heavier and what that does to my timing. This is another Acura, it's the TZ6 ST65, so it's a little bit heavier, but where you've seen those last few, they're all very, very close in terms of spec. If I push the weight on, now this one's a 67 gram, so don't have to change weight by much. And this is one of the reasons people say, oh, not always, but a lot of people say, well, how come you've got so many options on the wall? The reason is so that we can find a product that suits everybody without the player having to manipulate much. So I won't tell you what's likely to happen with this. I'm just going to swing. So weight, we're kind of this is about, relative to the last one is about 6 grams, 6 7 grams heavier, but versus say Ventus Black, it's only about 3 grams heavier. So one, my balance isn't good, spun out of that a little bit more, but it's got that curve out right. I'm going to do one more there. So the exaggeration of it is, club speed's still fairly strong, but the strike's gone. I've healed it where I've come out of it to fetch the club through, actually squared the face up, but I got it out of about there. So it's geared it around that way. So it stops me being able to stay in posture and turn through. I've got to collect it and fetch it, so I'll give it one more of those. And the problem then is I've got to rein the swing back to time it. So yeah, it's very much I get through the ball and then the club comes after. Now I've managed the face well, but I'm about 30 yards shorter because I've lost strike. So whilst direction's fine, that's just lost contact altogether and lost a load of efficiency. So if I push shaft rate up a little heavy, I mean the big negative for me is if I go heavy, that brings in a flip, which less likely now than it ever used to be, but that's the one that really hurts me on the course. So I want to guard against that at all times. So whereas over the years, when my action was more off, I used the weight to drop it in to be able to start it right. Now the problem is I'm more centered and I'm looking to turn out of the way. I need the handle to come with me to then lead the club face and keep the face square. Dave Hurley, what peak height are you happy with? I don't really, so there are lots of stats that are important and not necessarily important. Peak height's one of those ones that relates, it's a result of lots of other things. So my angle of attack is generally 2.5, 3 degrees up. Depending what your angle of attack is, depending on what your dynamic loft is, depending on what your ball speed is, that will vary what your optimum peak height is. Also, what flight do you want to see? I'd rather, and this is when we'll probably next time we'll get more into that, I would rather see a naturally slightly flatter flight because I've always spun the ball loads. So for me, high means weak. I would much rather have a flight that naturally is a bit sort of mid to strong, a going flight, because I'm much more comfortable than launching it up. If I've got to fight it down, I've got to stay on top of it, and that again for me can bring in a little bit of a smother left. So I play a bit of links golf. If me and the team are playing well enough, 2 tournaments a year. If we're not, it's 1. So play down the south coast, Halvertier down the south coast, April time, and then Grafton Morris, both of the old schoolboy alumni tournaments, up at North Norfolk at Hunstanton and Brancaster in October. So, but I've always liked the slightly stronger flight. So my peak height, once we get into the sort of final specs of it, I would more look at where the launch and the spin are than what the peak height ends up being. So I would rather see a spin around the 2000 mark and the launch sort of 11, 12. Don't really want it much above that as a stock swing. However, you know, that's also based on, I've used an old club head for a long time. So, you know, hell, if it goes 13-degree launch and 2000 spin and goes 6-7 yards further, I'm sure I'll get used to it pretty quickly. David says, I missed it earlier, the head's the TSR2, so I'm using a head that just doesn't really influence ball flight much. I want a neutral launch, neutral spin, so that we can just looking at the shafts. And it's a very stable head, it's a very consistent head from a dispersion point of view, but I don't want a head that's a real knuckleball because it could slightly skew data a little bit. So going to move on to the next one here. I'm going to go into the Mitsubishi, the Diamana GT. So technically not the lowest launching shaft, it's more of a mid-launch shaft in theory. But it's still quite a, the GT, when we first got it in, Matt Hart and I, when we were first hitting it, particularly the 70, is a really, really strong feeling shaft. So actually, relative to its principle, where it's designed to be, it's an update on the old Z series. Am I getting the terminology right? Got to remember the models that Justin Thomas has used. So it's, I might have got that terminology completely wrong, but anyway, so designed to have a little bit of launch, but then, you know, almost sort of Fubuki-like in terms of the flight profile that they're aiming for. But it's really quite a nice sort of tight feel. So, you know, as a shaft, when I've hit it every now and then, it's actually been quite a comfortable one to hit. So. So that felt really stable. When I said earlier about back and through feeling in plane, that felt really simple. Yeah, that felt really solid through the ball. And again, as I said, that just in that bit there, just really kind of, well, I say tight, like the head's really kind of held onto. It almost plays a lower torque than its numbers do. It's a very, very stable feel through impact. So again, doesn't feel like the shaft's popping and going left. Not that, as I've always said, not the shafts do that, but this is the feel element to it. Yeah, I feel like I moved through that really comfortably. So a little bit of draw there, but that just shows, you can see in that second one, club speed up, ball speed up, confidence up. Yeah, that sort of feels like I could really step on it and not lose the timing. So that's in the keep category. And actually that's probably going back to where I was saying the TZ5 being that little bit lighter. That's the one thing that potentially that one doesn't have, is that if I'm hitting drivers because I want to send it a decent distance, I've always been a fairly solid 3-wood player. So if I just want to put it in play, I can get the 3-wood out to 250 to 260. So that's quite a consistent club for me. So I'm never going to play driver trying to feather one into play. I'll just hit 3-wood. So I'd rather have the option of stepping on the drive and giving it a little bit more. So then only 2 left, then we'll go back to Tensei 1K Pro White. So Pro White, based on the whiteboard profile, stable tip, lower torque, lower flighted, lower spin. So the differentiation between Diamana and Tensei range, Diamana range with Mitsubishi is based around feel. Now, ironically, the GT, there's me saying it feels really quite tight. I don't think it's necessarily a smoother, softer kind of feel. But the Tensei series is more about new materials. So they've got the X-Link tech. Now that's about minimizing resin, maximizing graphite composition. The more graphite, the more stable. But actually you do need some resin in to dampen vibration and smooth the feel out. But that cross-link, rather than X-Link, that helps to stabilize that and keep that smoothness of feel there as well. But I have played in the past, I've played the previous, the Tensei Pro White, before switching to the XC6. Now that was a little bit, the previous model did swing a little bit heavier, was a little bit more tip weighted, and that's when I moved across to the XC. So this one I just need to, again, weight the head up a little bit more for swing weight. Comment from Barry, Dave Hurley, low bullets are the order of the day. Now, Dave I know has a higher ball flight than many, and plays on a course which, if I'm correct, he would rather he didn't have a high ball flight. But yeah, I think that's probably why actually Dave has a concern about peak height, because from what I understand from seeing his shot data, hopefully we'll get him in the fitting bay sometime, but I understand he has a high ball flight, so perfect for Arizona. So let's see where this goes. Okay, so again, allowed me to move quite freely through. Felt like I could move quite fast on it, and certainly the handle end really stayed with me nicely. This goes back to a bit like that. The HZRDUS shot, felt like the club didn't necessarily stay as in plane as that last one. Yeah, and so that's one where it felt good in the backswing, but I've just lost that left. So that for me, that club face, you know, from a neutral delivery, I've just overworked the weight and flipped that left. So that also, me having to add that bit extra weight onto the head, that also is a bit of a signifier that the swing weight, the natural swing rate of the shaft, a little bit light. So that would mean me having to steer at it a little bit. Daniel, what grip type size am I using? These are all just a standard tall velvet. Some have a logo, but either tall velvet 360 or standard tall velvet 60 round. I would generally play a ribbed grip. I've always played a ribbed grip. Currently playing the Sona Tour Calibrate Lambkin. That tread I quite like, but for these ones, again, for ease and continuity, rather than having to switch grips in and out during this, just using a standard tall velvet one layer. So, final one of these, the VA Composites, the Sinister. Now, those who are watching last Tuesday saw me hit this quite straight then, and probably won't be surprised to see this in the test. Yeah. Very, very different, very different feel. This is one of those ones where the stiff flex, these are all, yeah, whilst I'm up at 110, 111 miles an hour, I don't necessarily need to go into an X flex. The stiffs, partly this all gives them a kind of a constant flex profile, so against one less variable to work with. But I don't have to play an X flex. I've been playing the stiff flex of the XC6 for a number of years, and in theory I should be playing the X. But I've never hit a hook on that shaft because the shaft's kicked, and that's one of the things I think you know, most players should learn from. Actually, flex wise, the weight of it, the fact that the X flex, if an X flex shaft goes another 2 or 3 grams heavier, I've seen it from that Acura ST, it doesn't suit me. So I've got to be really, really sensitive to what dead weight of shaft I'm putting myself in, and not just try not to let pride take over. And actually, a good few years back, I stopped worrying about flex. I play a standard stiff in the driver. I play a soft step stiff in my irons for the Oban CT115s. As long as it goes online, I really don't care. I've taken so much abuse over the years that water off a duck's back. Okay. Yeah, so back like the Ventus Black, this just swings very slightly heavier, and for me that just means once it drops in, I can just put the power on. So that, yeah, that just shows maybe last week wasn't a fluke. That's very stable for spin. I know we're not necessarily focusing on the flight data yet today, but geez, that's a strong. It's interesting. It's a higher launch, so this is definitely not a low launching shaft. We've seen that launch angle kick up a degree or so, but the spin's in a great window, and straight out the gate there's a decent amount of club speed. So. Yeah, that's really stable. That's just straight, slight draw. So, yeah, so a little. I don't mind seeing a little bit of draw. I've seen that my whole playing life. So, I'm not. Neil's. I agree. That felt the swing. Neil said the swing on this looks very nice, which is very kind of you. Thank you. But yeah, it feels like I can just keep going with the swing, and as long as I just finish the swing, it feels like it's right there. And that the launch and spin off of those two, that stability. That's quite impressive. So, yeah, I think we're down to 4. I think we need to get those down to 2. So I think the way of doing this is because this is in, I'm gonna hit a couple more with this, and then I'll work my way back across the other 2, and we'll then look at where the other 3. So we'll look at where maybe with this dispersion, whether it's actually, it may just be how comfortable I feel I feel hitting it, but. What's interesting with this one, I don't know whether I got around to saying it a moment ago, is there's a definite kick in the shaft. In the stiff flex, in the X there's much less of it, but in the stiff there's a definite kind of pop through that midsection. But the tip section is so stable that it's not got that sense of kind of bit of wobble at the bottom end. So it's got that feel that you could really lay into it, which I'm going to try not to fall into the trap of. Yeah, I feel like I can really load up on that. And the thing here is, it's repetition. It doesn't matter if it's drawing a little bit left or fading a little bit right. Although for me, my slight right to left is the shot I like to see. I've always liked to see a slight draw, not a big one. But yeah, it's the regularity of it that's the most important thing. Mr. Warhound, good to see you. What's the #1 parameter you look at for yourself when fitting the driver? Well, ball speed's always important. You're not hitting driver to not hit it anywhere. I think when I'm fitting shaft, it's a little bit's going to be, well, it's the consistency of face to path for me, because club speed and things are within mile an hour of one another of all of these. If I get the strike on it, which if I've got a shaft in the right ballpark, I'm going to get decent ball speed. It's consistency. If you get the best shaft will give you the most consistency, and then you can dial in launch and spins and a little bit of shot shape with the head. But yeah, it's the consistency of. It's easy for me to say. So the fact that those 3 shots have pretty much gone down the line of one another is starting to make that look quite hard to beat. So yeah, that's quite compelling, and matches with last week as well. So it's not just the one-off. Yeah, it just falls into a slot for me. So I got a little bit more inside, I drew it a little bit more, but yeah, that's. Bhupinder, you're very right. Well, that's definitely going to be hard to beat. We'll go back to the Acura next, and I'm doing these as it's sometimes it's hard. it's sometimes hard to not want something. But I think actually you've got to look forward to using whatever you've got in the bag. And the more you hit it, the more you look forward to hitting it. That just tells you you've got something that's working well for you. So the downside is that it tempts you to try and smash the hell out of it. But hey, look, you know, I'm not playing golf for a living anymore. Well, technically, I never played golf for a living. Play golf for a couple of pence worth of prize pot. You know, a good deal of the enjoyment of playing golf is getting the driver away. I think everyone, whilst we all say we'll put it in play, 99% of people who come in here would very happily walk away with a driver that they're hitting further. You know, the pros, people like myself, we are no different. So I want to go back to this one because I think this is the one. This is one of the ones where I think, whilst it moved freely, I could probably generate some good club speed with it. I don't know whether I have that same consistency of shot with it. So, and it's quite good following the Sinister that swung well. I think it's going to highlight how good it is or not. Oh, I've just munched it. Damn, didn't want to do that. Okay. I say I didn't want to do that. It just clouds it up a little bit more. Okay, that moved well. Little higher spin. So it might well, if we're getting to the point where, like, of the four of them, you know, they're all performing solidly, that I might just look at, okay, which one is naturally bringing my spin down a little bit more? You know, which one do I might then just go after a couple with each of them, just so which one lets me put a little bit more in. You know, maybe I might, you know, hit a couple of shot shapes and see which one lets me manoeuvre the club a little bit more. But those are the real fine margins. That was good. Yeah, right, yeah, that was quite nice. Okay. And can do some quick switches around. Interestingly enough, that being that little bit lighter, now whilst the Sinister went well, that possibly felt like I might have the club face under a little bit more control, possibly. And this is where actually doing a couple with each is quite a good way to do it, because I can't just find, sorry, just going back to the Ventus Black, I can't start to develop a kind of a timing with it. If it works well straight out the gate, then it's probably pretty good. I think by the looks of it, I might have to get one head and have 4 different shafts, just switch around depending what outfit I'm wearing or something. But yeah, no, that was impressively straight, those 2 shots. And equally speaking, whilst I like to see a certain shot shape, I'll also take straight. So, okay. Right. Just change the notation. Which shaft has the lowest spin? Currently, Graham, I think the Sinister is slightly lower spin, but once I've done a couple more with this and the GT, I'll have a look at the data. It's whether that's based around the face closing a little bit. So that's where I think we then start to go, right, proportionately, if the face is closing, it's going to de-loft a little bit, so that might take a little bit of spin off. But I think really it goes down to, I think I said it, we'll look at where the consistency of those spins come. Right. Now that's had a little, that might be me a little bit, that had a little bit of a flip left. So that one has gone left slightly and the spin's down a little bit, but that definitely, make sure the TVs don't turn off, that definitely had a little bit of that in there, which is certainly something that I don't want to be feeling on the course. I mean, it's gone a long way into the rough, but okay. See whether it's just that swing or not. Yeah, it's definitely, so it's interesting where it felt really good earlier on, having gone through all the other ones, maybe I'm a little bit more keyed up in terms of feel. That feels like I've got to work harder to get the head through, and therefore that's now getting away from me left. Difference with the Sinister is that didn't feel like it got away from me left, it felt like a natural shape. That one I've now got to catapult a little bit, so we can take that one out. Right. And that was what was the reason I can take that out now, is that I did the same thing both shots. So even on the second one, where subconsciously I might be, a bit of me's probably trying to compensate, I couldn't, or couldn't certainly with any control. So Andy Corso need the Sunday morning straight out the car test. I do that every Sunday. Every Sunday I manage to play anyway. DM on a GT, James. So sorry, poor chap asked me to tell him every time I change something. I keep forgetting. But I think the in answer actually to that comment about the Sunday morning straight out the car test, actually part of that is, so where I was talking about the club feeling like it stays in plane, that's part of that. If the club stays in plane for me and feels, or rather, if it feels simple to swing it, if it feels like the club stays where I want it to, whether it's a bit of confidence thing, I don't think it's just confidence, but if it stays with me as I rotate, then the better that balance is, the more that club face stays on line, the more it gets out and around, the face rolls around. So the straight out the car and onto the first tee swing, actually it has quite a lot of relevance for, and this is just a feel, it may not be staying in play more, but for the club that feels like it stays with me more. So I think a lot of golfers have a lot more feel for this than they think they do. It's easier for me to stand here and talk about it because this is all I've done for 19 years. So I'm used to noticing and knowing what slight balance point changes or a slight weight change feels like, so I can relate it to a shot and a balance and how I feel to move it. Partly because I know the parameters change, but also I'm confident enough to know that if that club feels like it's done something, then I know it has. And if it feels stable and balanced, then I know it is. And I think a lot of that is the player trusting our own instincts and our own senses are really pretty darn good. And that's why in here we do test lots of different options, or as many as we can, to really zone in on them, because the one that naturally moves better is generally the one that's going to give you on that first and second swing, sorry to caveat that, is the one that's probably going to move best for you out in course when you haven't got a backup of, as I've got now, 40 shots with the driver. You know, the swing's grooved a little bit, but when you've got one go on the course, it has to work. And so almost these first ones going back to them now are quite key. So. Not bad. Not bad, a little heely. But for one that was, yeah, okay, face closed a bit, heel saved it a little bit. But for one that was a bit heely, actually maintained, so in terms of what parameters I'm looking for, again, answer to earlier, it didn't flare the spin up and it didn't drop much ball speed. So, you know, from that, partly a timing point of view, and you know, that's maintained ball speed well. I'm going to be really picky here in that was a really nice shot. Does it feel as good as one of the others? I'm going to do one more of this before. I'm just going to give this a bit of a clatter and see, but it just didn't feel like it. Again, it's a nice shot, and I'm being really picky, but did it feel as in control as the other ones? Not sure it did. It's got a little, you know, it's marginal, really marginal. I'm not sure it feels quite as controlled through the ball as the other two. So I just want to have a little look at, I'm going to just go into the data and just, I'm not going to filter anything out. I'm going to, actually be interesting to see. Yeah, it's interesting from a shot pattern point of view. My shot pattern's always going to err a little bit up the left-hand side. but you can see the ones, you know, the white, the short blue, which was the heavier shaft, the two shortest of next to one another, that was the heavier shaft for me, so I lost considerable amount of yardage there. Or you've got the massive shot spread of the light blue in the short right, and then the rip one up the middle. You don't want the unicorn shot that's brilliant. I want the one that's there every single time. So if I'm going to go down to the ones that that we've got still with us here. So I'll get rid of Ventus black, get rid of 1K white, ST65 stiff, HZRDUS green, 18 low. I'll leave the XC6, the white one, because that's my gamer, and then put it back on that dispersion. So we can see just from a distance consistency point of view, what's quite interesting there. Now, sods all, there are two that are white. The green ones, I don't know how visible those are, but the green one, that dispersion pattern is that much larger. Now, the shot left exaggerates that somewhat. However, it's the front-back dispersion. Does the cursor show on the screen on those? Yeah, so it's the front-back dispersion. So yes, the best one's up there, but there's more of a drop back. So, you know, that's certainly something where you could say, okay, there's something that marks it out a little bit, and that's the TZ5, that's the Acura, which is that little bit lighter, and as Graham Murray said there, looks like the extra 5 gram of the Sinister is the winner. I think that the lightest one of these three left is just that isn't quite staying with me as well. So that would be certainly my gut. I mean, when I went back to it, I hit a couple of great shots with it, and I think, you know, it's probably worth maybe one or two others with them. But I think in terms of what I take through to next time, I mean, the GT, even going back there, one of our fitters, Matt Hart's, on commenting, he said GT looks like it had a bit of a loopy swing in it, if you ask me. And that's the bit that I was sort of umming and ahhing with, thinking there. I felt, again, just a little bit like I was having to find the swing line with it. So, yeah, I'm gonna, what am I gonna do? Do I need to hit any more? I'm gonna go back, you know what, I'm gonna go back and hit a couple more with the Sinister shaft. Just to see, with a couple more, whether it stays in that dispersion pattern. But my gut feel, without wanting to kind of jump to a result too quickly, I will still take a couple of the shafts through to the head test bit. But my gut feel is that VA composite shaft, which is what I saw last week with it as well, it's the consistency of shot with it. Just looks to be a little bit better. And that's really, you know, if this one goes up the middle, we know the answer. It really does boil down to some really small differences. You know, ultimately these are three, you know, four if you put my XC6 in the mix as well. These are 4 great quality shafts. There's some really good quality materials on show here. There's some great, you know, brand new Acura, Mitsubishi, graphite design, VA. Are just some top line products, and actually, you know, the only reason there isn't an Oban shaft in here, I play an Oban shaft in my Fairwood, is that they were all kind of 66, 67 or sub 60, so they just sat outside the weight that works for me. So it's actually not a comment on the quality of any other shafts. These are all great quality materials. It's just, you know, as we've always advocated, it's just which one works for you. Right. Yeah, probably no. And again, to go back into this, so that one wasn't quite as well hit, so the spin's up a little bit more. But I think the thing which I'm, okay, and it's, yeah, it's marginal between the GT and this. I'll definitely take those two shafts through the test. But it just feels like, even though there's really nothing on the screen to show the difference, it just feels like this one maybe edges it a fraction on the consistency of where I can put it in the swing. So I'm gonna do a couple of shots. I'm gonna hit a couple of different shots. So I'm gonna go little fade, and see how manoeuvrable each of these two are. But realistically, we're down to 2. So let's picture a hole. I don't want to hit a little fade onto. Okay. We're going to call it 18th St George's Hill. You've got to fade out. You're in the rhododendrons on the left. And there's a little fade. Okay. And that's probably the bit. We'll see what the GT does, but that's the bit that control element where I'm able to call a shot, hit it, which is a disgraceful showboat. But essentially, when I'm on course, I'll do that occasionally. I'm not going to back off a shot, but I do want to know that if I want to hit a particular shot type, then it's there for me as well. Spin was a little high. Matt just saying, where was the strike on the face? I think pretty good, Mr. I just added a little bit of loft, I think, to that, or less of the face closed, spun it a little bit more. That might be where a different head style just helps to keep the spin down a little bit. Yeah, that control to be able. I've always been someone who plays shots, so if I'm swinging well, I'll probably go for too many. One question there: thoughts on getting fit or not while undergoing swing changes? Currently playing clubs fit for a different swing, but still working on the changes. That's our friend Norwegian Warhound. I think if it's in an ideal world, let whatever swing change you're doing bed in, because to a certain extent, you don't have to be absolutely kind of dialed in with it, but if you've got the basics of the change, not feeling like you're having to put the swing in place, then that's going to be better from a flow and from a timing point of view with your swing. So if it's a major change, definitely don't at that point. But once you can start to see the patterns starting to kick in, you haven't got to be 100% with it, but once you can start to get the feel of the swing dialing in and get that consistency of shot, then yeah. And certainly something like this, something like the driver, I definitely wouldn't come during a swing change or much of one, because it could change the amount of loft you deliver, and that then can make or break the fitting. You could get fit for the wrong style head or the wrong loft, and both of those are very expensive mistakes. So we want to definitely know what we're fitting for. So I'm going to do one stock swing, and then I'll go to that fade swing and just see whether I can move the club as well with this as the last shaft. Pretty good move, maybe a little high. Yep. Okay. And then I'll try that little fade. Okay. So I'm going to play that same shot, just trying to just drop it left to right a little bit. Avoid those bushes. I think that probably gives us the answer, yeah. So that's where the very slightly heavier shaft for me gives me a bit more manoeuvrability. So if I'm just standing and absolutely blasting at it, the lighter shaft, absolutely fine. The moment I want to go and play a shot not necessarily in my normal pattern, that shot then gives me cause for concern, because it's that left one that's damaging. I can play with something that fades, goes up 10 yards short or 15 yards short a bit in play, because I can just play another iron into a green. I don't want to be chipping out sideways out of a bush. So that then, I didn't think we'd get down to 1. Points us to that shaft. But yeah, I've hit 48 drivers in a row. I'm knackered. Not designed for this. Not designed for this chip. So yeah, so interesting. That last test there tells me which shaft is the right one for me, because it's allowed me to hit a shot that I'm gonna need regularly. It's not a kind of a one-off shot that you're never going to play on the course. It's something I'm going to want on a reasonable basis, and want to have that knowledge and control that it's there for me. So yeah. So shaft-wise, Mr. Affable, the Sinister 65 looks like that's the one for me. So, And of course, those that are less polite about my dress sense would say that that goes with quite a lot of my outfits. So yeah, so that looks like I will still hit a couple of these with heads next week, but yeah, I think just that last shot there shows me that I can play. Might sound an odd comment. I can play golf with this one. I'm not just standing and blasting it, and that then gives me that little bit more stability and consistency. So that is driver fit part 1 completed. Thank you very much for all your interest. The fact that anyone wants to watch me hitting drivers is fascinating. But no, really grateful for all the comments and all the questions, and polite or impolite from our fitters. Yeah, no, I hope it's been interesting hearing how I talk through it from my own point of view playing. And those are actually some of the things that when I'm fitting and I'm watching people swing, I'm using my experience of hitting shots and knowing what weight and what balance does what to my action in how I fit people. So if I know that something's a little heavy, gets behind and flips, so I can see that in someone's swing, I know what to do. And so a lot of being a good fitter is about being able to understand what's going on, but from your own point of view, if you've not experienced it, you can't as quickly come to conclusions. So the testing bit, whilst it's massively key for fitters to do that, and to actually remind ourselves. So actually, this for me has been a great process to remind myself of the really small, subtle variances between some of these products, because you can't have everything in the back of your head the whole time. So that I'll probably pull a couple of these products a little bit more regularly than I might have done in the past. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you're not bored. I hope you want to come and watch the final bit next week. But we'll be looking at the head side of things next week, and we'll pull the Sinister and the GT next week, and we'll see if we can dial in a new beast, see how much we can beat my old one by. I will bring my gamer in, and we'll compare that next week. So thank you so much for watching. Hope it's been fun, and we'll see you next week.